Welcome to the Truth of a Comfort Show. Today I'm going to be talking about Naftali Bennett, the ex-Israeli Prime Minister during the COVID years. There's since been an administration between him and the current one of Benjamin Netanyahu. However, I'm not actually here to talk about Israel's politics, or even really Naftali Bennett. I'm going to be discussing and showing you clips of what he recently said on a podcast. So this is posted on his YouTube channel, Naftali Bennett, and he is on a podcast with someone I'm not really familiar with. I'll put it in the show notes who it is, but that's not really the important part. The important part is he makes these pretty stark comments about the Russia-Ukraine war, his role as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine at the start of this war to try and bring about a ceasefire and a peace deal. And he talks about Schultz, Macron, Biden and Boris Johnson fully coordinating on this process. They have different views, which we'll get to. But he actually talks about how the first couple of weeks of this war, in his mediator role, Ukraine was willing to give up their bid to join NATO, which he says, which is one of the causes of the war. He actually says this himself. And Putin was willing to give up his aims of denazification and demilitarization, which was what I think he said in his special operations speech, right, obviously at the start of the war. And they was both basically, a ceasefire was possible. This is what he says. And then he says he was fully coordinating with, France, Germany, Britain, and the US, and they had sort of different views on the war. Boris Johnson took the most hardened line of most aggressive of that we have to punish Putin and Russia. France and Germany had a more pragmatic view, and Biden was a bit of both. I find it kind of hard to believe that America was also being pragmatic. I'm sure they was kind of on the UK line as well, maybe. Again, this is interesting because it comes from an Israeli Prime Minister, which is pretty huge considering how much aid they receive from the US. They're basically, top allies. Top ally, obviously, like in the Middle East. They've backed them for many years. They continue to back them and they work hand in glove. And you can chuck the UK in that as well. So that's why it gives it a bit more, to what he's, a bit more bite to what he's saying. It's not coming from a Russian official or an Indian or, name another country. It's coming from Israel, their ally. But if you remember at the start of the war, before the war, you had Macron and Schultz who were on the phone to Putin. They were trying to make a peace deal, I think just before it happened. I think once they invaded, maybe they continued to try. So it kind of matches up to what he's saying there. They took the pragmatic line. He talks about how Germany, when the war started and he had a meeting with Schultz, the German Chancellor, that they was, pretty stressed because they get so much of their gas from the US, which is obviously interesting with the Nord Stream pipeline developments. But again, this kind of matches up to what he says. I'm going to play 3 clips and then I'm going to finish one with Zelensky actually on CNN, where he says that he was told privately that Ukraine would never join NATO, but to say publicly the door was open. This was on CNN. He said this this is on CNN's website, speaking Ukrainian, but it's English subtitles on their website. So again, matches up with what even Naftali Bennett says. This is one of the causes of the war. This was actually in the discussions when he was mediating, and he kind of, basically lets the cat out of the bag that the West, he says this as well, along with the other person he's speaking to, the West curbed this peace deal. There was a chance of a ceasefire and a peace deal, but the West decided to go after Putin and punish him, whether that was the UK and the US pressuring Germany or France, or whether they agreed. They seem to not want it, and they're still not as on board with other allies. But who knows, whether it's just for show, to show they're not, the US is bitch, basically. I'm not sure. But obviously, they came to a decision. He talks about he didn't think it was the right decision, not because he's, against sort of the I'm not really sure. He doesn't really go into why he was against it, actually, but he says he thought this was a better path. But he also doesn't really blame them. He doesn't say that, this is horrible that they've done this proxy war and it's going to kill all these people and there was a genuine chance. He says, basically, we don't know the benefits, the advantages, disadvantages. So until that's done, I'm not going to say they're wrong. He just thought then that it was the wrong route, which is interesting. And that Israel and Russia, had a bit of a... was able to actually talk to each other, considering they have a lot of, or in Syria, obviously Israel bombs Syria quite often and Russia defends them, so it's quite interesting probably as well why Israel's been reluctant to sell any arms to Ukraine, because they don't want to piss off Russia too much, considering what they're doing at odds in Syria. But anyway, that is a side issue. Let's go to the first clip where he talks about Ukraine and Russia and what they were willing to give up. And just before that, he does talk about how he generally thought there was a good chance for a ceasefire and that Germany was pretty stressed by, their main gas supplier. Now, basically, NATO are almost at war with them and, going to have to supply arms to Ukraine, and there was a lot of strong rhetoric. So let's let the clip play itself, and I'll stop it where it needs to, but I'm going to try and stay out of it as much as I can.
כל הזמן אמרתי, יקרה כפר כנא מתישהו, ואנחנו בחלום, מה זה כפר כנא? אני אסביר למאזינים.
אסקלציה ביטחונית לא מתוכננת שחייבים...
יקרה איזה אירוע קצה שיהרגו הרבה אזרחים, ואז כבר לא יהיה אפשר להגיע, זה יהיה מאוד קשה להגיע להפסקת אש. גם ככה היה מאוד קשה. אז קראתי לזה יקרה כפר כנא, הסברתי לאמריקאים. לא היה צעד שעשיתי בלי תיאום מלא עם ביידן, עם מקרו, עם בוריס ג'ונסון, שולץ, וכמובן עם זלנסקי. אבל חשוב לי לחדד...
חשוב שיש סיכוי שתצליח?
יש לי ויכוח על זה עם האמריקאים, עם בדיוק... אני חושב שהיה סיכוי, ואני אנמק, והם אומרים שלא היה סיכוי. אבל זה שתי שאלות, האם היה סיכוי והאם היה ראוי?
וגם אולי הם לא רצו שתצליח, יכול להיות? אז בוא תציג קודם את הפשרה שלך, עד כמה שאתה יכול להשיג, וכל זה עוד לפני שאתה מספר על הפגישה עצמה.
אז בעצם היו כמה סוגיות, בוא נגיד הסוגיות המרכזיות, בפגישה עם פוטין, הוא נתן לי שני ויתורים מאוד גדולים, שהיום זה כאילו מובן מאליו, אבל זה לא היה מובן...
בפגישה הראשונה עם פוטין, לפני ה...
לא, בפגישה...
בשבת.
בשבת. תכף נספר את זה, אבל רק נגיד, הוא ירד מדנאציפיקציה. קרי, מלחסל את זלנסקי.
מה, הוא ממש אמר לך במילים האלה?
אני על זה, בגלל שזה כל כך, זה הדבר הכי יקר, זה חיי מנהיג, וידעתי שזלנסקי תחת איום, הוא היה בבונקר שלא ידעו את מקומו, אז באיזשהו שלב, 3 שעות פנימה 4, אנחנו כבר מדלגים לתוך הפגישה, אני אומר לו, שמע, מה עם הסיפור הזה? אתה מתכוון להרוג? והוא אמר, אני לא ארוג את זלנסקי. ואז אמרתי לו, אני צריך להבין שאתה נותן לי את המילה שאתה לא הורג את זלנסקי. הוא אמר, אני לא הורג את זלנסקי. אחרי הפגישה, עוד באוטו מהקרמלין לשדה התעופה, אני מתקשר לזלנסקי או בוואטסאפ או בטלגרם.
לא פחד שהם יראו את זה?
לא, אין לי בעיה, כי הייתי... לא, ההנחה היא
שרואים, אוקיי,
ההנחה שלי... מתקשר לזלנסקי ישירות, ואני אומר לו, תשמע, יצאתי מפגישה, הוא לא הולך להרוג אותך. הוא אומר לי, אתה בטוח? אמרתי, 100%, הוא לא הורג אותך. אחרי 2 שעתיים זלנסקי עלה למשרד שלו, עשה סרט סלפי כזה מתוך הלשכה, אני לא מפחד והכל. מכל מקום זה היה ויתור אחד. הוויתור השני הוא ירד מפירוז אוקראינה. גם זלנסקי עשה ויתור מאוד גדול באותה שבת. אני חושב שאנחנו מדברים על השבת השנייה אחרי פרוץ המלחמה. היה פרוץ המלחמה, היה יום חמישי או משהו כזה, את שבת הבאה, הייתי במוסקבה, וזלנסקי ירד מהצטרפות לנאטו, הוא אמר, אני מוותר על זה. אלה צעדים אדירים של כל צעד, אדירים, ויתורים מאוד גדולים. המלחמה כולה קרתה בגלל הדרישה להיכנס לנאטו, ובא זלנסקי ואומר, אני יורד מזה.
Obviously, that's really interesting that, obviously, again, he says Zelensky said he was no longer wanting to join NATO, and that was one of the reasons the war broke out, was because of that one. And he also mentions there about getting Putin's word that he won't kill Zelensky. So the media, as in the mainstream media in America and the UK, have picked up on this interview. And I had a read of a few articles. I'm not going to make this statement in full because I have to go through and read more. But the only bit I've really seen them mention, and all the headlines, are Putin agreed not to kill Zelensky. And I think the reason they've obviously focused on this as well is because Boris Johnson obviously made the allegation that Russia and Putin threatened to kill him and that they could take him out, so they've obviously focused on that. I had a look at the few of the articles, The Guardian, AP, a few other ones. I'll show you kind of the list after. I'm not going to go through them. Just controlling F, trying to see, did he mention about Boris Johnson and the other Western allies trying to block a ceasefire? It all kind of focuses on that. And I also just wanted to pick up on, before he was talking about, before this clip earlier, a couple of minutes before, he was going back and forth with Zelensky and Putin about this. So let's carry on with what was being spoken about there.
ואז מה שנשאר, הרבה, היו בגדול, הסוגיה הכי מורכבת היא הסוגיה הטריטוריאלית, של דונבאס ושל האי קרימיה, וגם של המסדרון שהתחיל להיווצר בין השניים, כן, באזור...
Sorry, that actually was the last bit of that clip I wanted to show. And just quickly, while I'm here, you can see, look, it's on Naftali Bennett's YouTube channel, legitimately. So, there's no arguments with what is being said. So let me go to the next clip. I'm just going to quickly take a look here what minute it's actually on. So we're going to skip a bit ahead. And just for full disclosure, I have not watched the full podcast. It's 4 hours 51. I think I will watch it at some point because I'm sure there's a lot of other nugs in there which shed some light on some interesting things, about Israel itself. During COVID, obviously, they did, they was ahead with the vaccines quite a lot. It'd be interesting to see, did he get any pressure? Who did he speak to? Who were they getting his ideas with? Again, separate issue. Let's go to the next section, which is 255. And this is about the different leaders who have different perspectives that I spoke about. But again, you can hear it from him.
אני לא מאשים את העם הגרמני של היום, ומגיע ללשכה של שולץ, מגיע יחד עם שמרית, שהיא היועצת המדינית, עשתה עבודה מעולה, באמת עבודה מעולה לאורך הדרך. היא, אני חייב להגיד, גם היא וגם אייל חולטה, כל הזמן היו סקפטים, אמרו, מה אתה עושה? זה חכה, לאט, מה...
צריך להגיד, אנשים צעירים, שניהם. שלושתכם.
כן, לא כאלה צעירים, הם בשנות ה-40.
זה לא אנשים נשיבים עם איזה רקע מדיני ומיליוני סכסוכים.
כן, אבל לשניהם אנשים מאוד אינטליגנטים, מאוד מנוסים, ושניהם חושבים שאני מתקדם מהר מדי. ואני חלוק עליהם. ואני מכריע שאנחנו נעשה את זה.
למה חשוב לנסוע לגרמניה?
לגרמניה, כי גרמניה היא השחקנית, היא וצרפת השחקנים המשמעותיים ביותר באירופה, וכדי להביא להסכם, כולם צריכים לעשות דברים, יש המון דברים שצריך לעשות, אז נסעתי אליו, אכלנו ארוחת ערב, הם הביאו לי אוכל.
Sorry, just for some context here, because it's not quite out of the bit on this minute. He's basically talking about how he went to Germany, which I think is one of the first times an Israeli prime minister went there, or himself, because obviously what happened in World War II and the Holocaust is a touchy subject. So he's talking about here, I think he's speaking to his advisors and other officials, that, you know, they're saying it's a bad idea to go to Germany, but he's gone there, he's gone out for a meal, he helicoptered over Berlin, just to give you some context before this starts. So he's having a meeting with Scholz.
אוכל כשר, וישבנו עם היועץ לביטחון לאומי שלו, ואנחנו, מהשדה תעופה הקפיצו אותנו מסוק, זה היה לי מוזר לטוס מעל ברלין עם מסוק, אבל בסך הכל, בכל הנסיעות, כל פעם גיבשתי לעצמי, רשמתי את מה היה בדיוק, כי בזמן אמת לא יכולתי לרשום, רשמתי מעין פרוטוקול של מה היה, ואז מה הצעדים הבאים, בסוף מה המחלוקות במשא ומתן ומה צריך מכל אחד. משם אני חושב שביחד אפילו, אבל אני לא בטוח, עדכנו את האמריקאים, ואת מקרון.
מה זה אמריקאים? ביידן עצמו או ש...
לא, הפעם, זה היה בדרך כלל מול היועץ לביטחון לאומי ג'ייק סליבן, לפעמים מול ביידן, לפעמים מול בלינקן. הם מאוד הדוקים שם.
כן.
ובוריס ג'ונסון. עכשיו, אתה יודע, היו... כל מנהיג והדרך שלו, בוריס היה... בוא נגיד, אפשר לחלק ספקטרום של מנהיגים, מי יותר נוטה לקו של עכשיו צריך להילחם בפוטין.
כי הוא הרע ואסור לתגמל את הרעים.
נכון.
ומי אומר, אבל עזוב יש מלחמה,
מי אומר,
ואז
נכון.
מלחמה כולם מפסידים.
נכון, ובוא נגיד, בוריס ג'ונסון היה מאוד בקו התקיף, הייתי אומר שמקרון ושולץ היו בקו היותר פרגמטי נקרא לזה, וביידן גם וגם, וזהו, ואז אני חוזר לארץ ומתחיל מרתון משא ומתן של טיוטות. עכשיו,
הלשכה שלך מטפלת בזה? זאת אומרת, זה לא משרד החוץ גם, זה ממש...
לא, הלשכה...
So that's the bit I just wanted to show there. Again, he's talking about, I sort of obviously said it, but again, in his own words, Boris Johnson took the most aggressive line. Scholz and Macron were more pragmatic, and the Americans, Biden, and their tight little National Security Council, Sullivan, Blinken, were a bit of both. Again, you know, make of what you will, that's what he's saying. Again, think back. You know, Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, before the war started, was coming from the UK and the US. You know, Russia's going to invade. And, you know, personally, honestly, I didn't think they was going to. You know, I don't look, at that time, wasn't, you know, crazy knowledge about Russia, Ukraine. I knew kind of the basics. Like many people, you know, got it wrong. I thought because the US, UK make so many allegations all the time that don't come to light, their previous, obviously, resume, their CV of lying about WMDs, you know, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, all these lies, and just the manner of what they were saying. There was like, so was it Ned Price? He's the like the White House, not spokesman, but he takes, you know, questions, and they're like, yeah, Russia has this false flag plan to blame on Ukraine so it can invade, and then one of the reporters asked like, what's your evidence for this? You know, hang on, let me just check. I'm not on mute. No, I'm not. Yeah, they're like, what's your evidence of this? And he's like, basically said, oh, we've just declassified our claim. So basically they're saying Russia is going to do a false flag attack, blame on Ukraine. You know, we've never heard the language false flag from government officials saying that's what another government's going to do. That's a crazy conspiracy theory. And they just basically said, oh, we said and wrote on a bit of paper, they're going to do this, and we declassified it. That's evidence. And the guy was just like, that's not evidence. That's you saying this is going to happen, and then saying that's your proof. It was ridiculous. It came across ridiculous. I don't know if that was the point. You know, it was straight like the guy literally said, this is like Alex Jones stuff, you know, something actors, can't remember. Obviously, Russia did invade. And at the time, so my point here is Biden and Boris had a lot of domestic issues themselves, a lot of scandals, and obviously poor ratings. So people were saying, you know, they're just saying this to try and distract from their own basically scandals. Obviously, Russia did invade, and I think with Boris Johnson, the aggressive line, maybe it was, also to do with his domestic politics. I'm sure that was part of it, but I'm sure he's fully on board on this. Like the UK and the US have a different hatred towards Russia to the other countries. That's why they've been the most hardline, probably along with Poland and other ones. There's no way they was going to lose this opportunity to try and crush Putin. France and Germany have a different relationship with Russia, not as strong and more reliant on gas. The US obviously has its own suppliers. The UK barely gets any from Russia. So, there's different ideas. Again, it matches up to what he says. From what's happened from the UK and the US, basically designating Russia as, the number one enemy, the whole Russiagate thing, even, trying to say they're involved in Brexit, the poisonings, and, their intervention in Syria. They didn't like that. You constantly hear UK, US officials talk about the rules-based international order. Don't talk about international law. The rules, international, American-backed order, where obviously they can have their own might on nations. They never actually mention really international law when they talk about that, which is quite funny. And China and Russia have picked up on that. Anyway, that is a side note. Let me go to the final clip, where he basically nails down that the West actually curbed the peace deal. The guy asked him, and he's like, yeah, basically. So let's hear that. That's on 2:59. Again, I will put this in the show notes. I'll put the minutes I looked at for you to look at yourself. And there's some other interesting nuggets around, I'm sure. So if you do watch the whole thing, let me know, comment what minute it was discussed. But again, I do plan to watch this. So let me just check. 2:59:28. Let's get to there. Keeps delaying when I do this, so let's just do it now. Oh, look at that, nice and quick. So 2:59. Right.
על זה. אני חושב שהוא הבין שניהלנו מדיניות מאוד חכמה בעיניי, מאוד מתוחכמת. הלך הלוך חזור והכל, ואז נגיד את זה בצורה רחבה, אני חושב שהייתה החלטה של המערב לגיטימית, שכרגע צריך להמשיך להכות בפוטין ולא להגיע.
אבל מה זה להכות בפוטין? פוטין ניקה באוקראינה, לא?
שנייה, לא, בסדר, אבל שאל מול, זאת אומרת, הגישה היותר תקיפה, אני אגיד לך משהו, אני לא יודע להגיד שהם שגו.
כי אתה אומר, אולי בריונים אחרים בעולם היו רואים את זה.
העמדה שלי באותו הזמן, בעניין הזה זה לא אינטרס לאומי ישראלי.
כן.
בשונה מקונסוליה או איראן, שאני דואג לישראל, עומד חזק פה, כן. אין לי סי, אני בסך הכל מוציא לפועל ומתווך, אבל הכתובת שלי זה אמריקה בעניין הזה, ואני לא פועל על דעת עצמי. כל פעולה שעשיתי הייתה מתואמת לפרטי פרטים, גם עם ארצות הברית, גם עם גרמניה, גם עם צרפת.
אז הם בעצם חדלו את זה?
בגדול, כן, בגדול הם חדלו את זה, ובאותו זמן חשבתי שהם שוגים. בדיעבד, מוקדם לדעת. היתרונות...
Okay, that's pretty interesting what he just said there. Obviously, one, he's not doing as he pleases. As much as he's mediating between Russia, Ukraine, he does not do as he pleases. He mentions America directly and then obviously coordinates with other allies, but he doesn't do what he pleases. He straight up says, so the guy says, did they block it? Yes. Obviously, if people want to make the claim that certain phrases in the subtitles could be wrong, whatever, sure. But the general sense of what he says here, and at the start, the West blocked it, they took the aggressive line, they wanted to strike Putin, and he thought they was wrong. But here, he's going to talk about how we don't know until the future what the disadvantages and advantages are. So I'm going to carry on playing it.
והחסרונות. החיסרון של התמשכות המלחמה זה הפגיעה הקשה בחיי אדם באוקראינה וברוסיה. זה פגיעה מאוד קשה באוקראינה עצמה, במדינה, התשתיות שם צריך יהיה לעשות תוכנית שיקום מאוד גדולה. מין תוכנית מרשל. הפגיעה בייצוא חיטה ומזון למזרח התיכון, אם כי זה טופל חלקית לאחרונה, עליית מחירי האנרגיה, מה שיוצר לחצים כבדים על דמוקרטיות. אל מול זה...
וגם הגירה, לא?
גם לחץ, אם יהיה רעב באפריקה, אנחנו נראה הגירה לאירופה, מה שיסכן את אירופה. לעומת זאת, ואני לא אומר את זה בציניות, לעומת זאת, יש פה אמירה, לראשונה אחרי המון שנים, הנשיא ביידן השכיל לייצר אליינס שכזה, אל מול תוקפן בתפיסה הכללית, וזה מקרין גם על זירות אחרות, כמו סין, טיואן, ויש לזה השלכות. לכן מוקדם לדעת. אני לא אומר פה, יש לי טענה אחת, והדבר השני אני לא טוען. אני טוען שבסבירות לא רעה אפשר היה להגיע.
אם הם לא חודלים את זה?
אם הם לא חודלים, לא בטוח. אבל אני לא טוען שזה היה נכון. בזמן אמת חשבתי שנכון להגיע להפסקת אש. עכשיו, אני לא יודע להגיד.
אולי באמת זה היה מתגמל את הבריון בצורה מהירה מדי.
יכול להיות שהיה משדר מסרים לא נכונים למקומות אחרים. מדינאות זה דבר מאוד מאוד מורכב, ויש גם דברים שאני לא רוצה לפרט פה, למה יכול להיות שזה היה נכון או לא נכון.
גם בהיבט של ישראל.
מהרבה היבטים. אבל ככה או ככה, אני מאוד גאה.
Right, so he says a few different interesting things there. Obviously, again, they claim obviously that the US and the West Allies kind of blocked it and he thought it was the wrong thing to do. But he talks about how Biden created an alliance that looks aggressive. So I think he means there an alliance against Russia and the Ukraine war, sending arms, etc. And then he mentions, which could be perceived similarly to an alliance like against China, with Taiwan. You have the Quad, Japan, India, the US and Australia, and AUKUS, which is like, you know, Australia, the UK and the US, directed at China. And he also actually does talk about, in the bit before our first clip, he talks about how, you know, there's two different perceptions between the West and Russia. You know, the Russian perspective is the West agreed to stop expanding NATO after the fall of the war and the Soviet Union, but they kept expanding all the way to their backyard, as in Ukraine. Why does Ukraine need to join it? You've already taken the Baltic states, you know, why do you need to keep going? And he talks about it's their backyard. And he brings up the Monroe Doctrine, which is a very old doctrine where the US basically says the Western Hemisphere, South America, the Americas, is their sphere of influence. You know, you touch them, you mess with them, you're messing with our interests. Whether it was Britain and France, as he mentions, or, you know, countries down the year. You know, the US takes South America pretty serious, you know, like anything that happens, any military alliances, you know, Cuba as well, the Caribbean. And then he talks about, you know, the West perception of Russia's taken, you know, did this with Georgia, now Ukraine, and it's going to invade the Baltic states, which obviously isn't going to happen. You know, he invaded Ukraine, which is, he hasn't invaded Poland before when they joined, like he saw this as a red line. But, yeah, he says it's obviously not really Israelis' interest, he's not sure if it's right or wrong. He was just the mediator, and that's what he thought at the time, and the West blocked it. So I'm going to go to the last clip. It's only going to be very short, and then I'll have my closing comments. It is obviously... Oh, bear with me 1 second. So this is Zelensky on CNN with Fareed Zakaria. This is CNN's website, as you can see, and this was... Does it have a date? It's sometime in 2021. Like it's, I'll try and get the date. I'll put it in the show notes. Again, everything will be in the show notes. Again, sorry, 3 agains. He is going to be speaking Ukrainian, so look at the subtitles again. And this is about, could So this is the headline. Could Ukraine have averted war by abandoning its NATO quest? We heard what Naftali Bennett said. That was one of the demands, basically, of Russia, and Ukraine was willing to give it up. Well, this is what he says about it anyway.
Any kind of military pressure on us, but everyone in the West told me that we do not have any chance of NATO and EU membership. I asked them not to drive the Ukrainian people into a corner, because our people are brave, and the West should also be brave in telling directly to the Ukrainian people that, well, you're not going to be NATO and EU member. They do not have a consolidated position, and I requested that personally. I requested them personally to say directly that we are going to accept you into NATO in a year or 2 or 5. Just say it directly and clearly, or just say no. And the response was very clear. You're not going to be a NATO or EU member, but publicly the doors will remain open. I asked them about preemptive sanctions.
So there you have it. Zelensky, I played this clip before. I think it's a valuable clip that's gone off the radar. It's on CNN, on their website. What more could you want? See, I kind of hate it. Videos on Twitter that are shared of, you know, some Ukrainians or whoever it is, and there's subtitles. I don't know, you know, are they legitimate? Obviously here, I was totally mistaken. It wasn't subtitles. It was someone translating in English. Even better. The other one was Naftali Bennett's YouTube channel through YouTube. So the subtitles are going to be pretty accurate, which is good. But there you have it. He is told privately, Ukraine will not join NATO or the EU, but and he's like, come on, you need to be honest with the Ukrainian people, whether he's just, you know, playing that up to preserve his own image. But he is told very clearly, I'll put the quote in text so you can look at it. He's told privately they would never join NATO or the EU, but publicly they have to leave the door open. So whether you think Putin's just claiming that's one of the reasons, an excuse so he can go into Ukraine for whatever reasons you may think, Naftali Bennett talks about that was generally part of the negotiations, or maybe, you know, you're going to claim he's saying that for, you know, I don't know, propaganda purposes. Probably clearly not. But one of the reasons for this war, it would seem, or one of them, doesn't mean it's the whole reason, was Ukraine joining NATO on its doorstep, NATO. You know, Ukraine was kind of a de facto NATO member, trained them. Trump sent arms. Obama didn't. Trump sent arms. Provocative, no. But whatever you think about that, that's what Zelensky says. You know, feel free to make your mind up about this. I thought it was pretty interesting. And here, see, it's just all about Putin promised me he would not kill Zelensky. So don't... Oh, business. Oh, look, 7th. Oh, sorry. So, Business Insider actually do mention about it. AP, promise not to kill. And if you go to the next page, if you just... The Independent, CNBC, is all Putin promised not to kill Zelensky. It's all the same thing. It doesn't really focus on the West bloc. That Business Insider one does. I didn't actually see that previously. Good to see. But there you have it. Make up your mind about it. I thought, again, start in comments just to kind of recap what he said. I don't want to go on too long because I think the video's going on a lot longer than I planned it to be. He was mediating between Russia and Ukraine. He was constantly on the phone to both of them. He got an assurance from Putin that he would not kill Zelensky. Zelensky relinquished his want to join NATO for Ukraine. Putin said they would not force Ukraine to demilitarize or denazify. Again, whether this is complete truth or not, I think is an important figure telling us this, an Israeli Prime Minister, ex-Prime Minister. He then talks about the different views of France, Germany, the US, the UK. The UK on the aggressive side with the US, and then France and Germany on the other side. And then the final clip where he basically says the West curbed the chance for a ceasefire. He generally thought there was a chance for a peace deal and a ceasefire. They decided they're going to strike Putin. He thought it was the wrong decision at the time. But he doesn't really know that yet. He's not saying it was wrong. He thought it was wrong at the time. We don't know the future, basically, implications for it. And then I just finished there with Zelensky obviously saying they was never going to join NATO anyway, so it was all for nothing. And think about how cynical that is, by the way. Whatever you think about this whole war, the fact that he was told they're never going to join it, but he had to publicly say they still would, and even now Jens Stoltenberg's, and countries still say it. They still say it. And it's all just to provoke Russia, just for this facade that is going to happen. Two nuclear armed countries at heads with each other, and they're just doing stuff for the sake of annoying another country, pretending it's on the table. Russian officials might even have access to that video. It's just, and it's on CNN. But anyway, I've gone on quite long. I hope you enjoyed the video. Check out obviously the Naftali Bennett's full podcast. Leave any comments. I think I will watch it. But thanks for watching to the Truth Over Comfort show, and I'll see you next time.